I don't think he is losing much sleep over the preseason All-American rankings. I can just see his face now if anyone were to ask him about that in a press conference. But we've got the Phil Steele All-Americans and All-SEC squads. Palmer, you put this up a couple days ago. Brock Bowers, of course, Cedric Van Pran and Pop Dumas Johnson on the first team for Steele. Javon Bullard and Malachi Starks on the second team. I know Javon Bullard has probably bookmarked that, and he's staring at it before he goes to bed every night. He's a very motivated fellow this offseason, it seems like. And Tate Ratledge and Michael Williams on the third team. Any of those surprise y'all?
I mean, to be Bullard, I guess maybe a little bit. I think he could have probably gotten the first team nod for sure. And like you said, I bet he's printed it out and he's got it above the bed. So he's just staring at it when he goes to sleep at night. But, you're making a transition in position, and that probably is some of what led to that. I mean, if you were going to do a star, I think it was an easy choice to put him there. How does he take the safety? That's probably part of that consideration. But, otherwise, I think that those are all pretty respectable picks. I can't argue with any of that. I don't know that there's anybody I feel like was snubbed necessarily from any of the teams. There's some guys that got to prove it this year. I think that, Malachi's second team, says Rhett Womack. Second team, I think that's a fair place to put Malachi Starks moving into this year. Can he play himself into a first team? Absolutely. But, coming off of what was a tremendous freshman year, yeah, there's probably still some room to grow for sure.
Rusty?
Not, man, I hate to sound coach speak. Those things to me really, they kind of a grain of salt. I want to see who makes the teams after the season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always go back to this. I mean, it took Georgia until the Florida game to insert Jordan Davis as a freshman. And forever, after they inserted him, they were not the same team until that guy left. And I mean that in the best way. So you really don't know who's going to be who. I'm confident in this. I think that Brock Bowers is the top college football player in America, along with Marvin Harrison Jr. That's not a quarterback.
Yeah,
he's just he's a unicorn, and I think Georgia fans are gonna appreciate it. But I think every time you see 19 trot on that field in Sanford Stadium, and every time you see him put on that red helmet, you need to appreciate it, because they're going to talk about this guy forever.
Yeah,
and it would surprise me if that number's not hanging, even though Hines Ward wore that number. If that number's not hanging somewhere, or at least something in that stadium with the amount of potential he's got, I think it. If you want to start talking about awards, I'll give you an award. You better appreciate Brock Bowers, because he is probably the greatest tight end, probably the best tight end in the last 20 years in college football, and Georgia fans are going to get him for another season.
Absolutely.
Now, I was one guy that I thought about here, Wes, and
I got one.
I may have missed it if you said it. Was Smile Munden.
There you go.
Yeah.
And where I was going.
And I understand the injury concern there. So I get kind of the idea of where that's headed. But Palmer, I'm just going to throw it to you, because I think we're vibing on the same wave here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you want to look at the stats, he finished with more tackles than Jamon did last year in less games.
Also sacks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you're talking about a linebacker in 2023 and what it takes to play that position, he is exactly what you want. He's able to move in space. I mean, to me, he's kind of the hybrid. If you want to compare these guys to Georgia linebackers of lately, Jamon Dumas Johnson is Nakobe Dean. Great tackler, thumper, somebody that's going to be a leader. And then I think that when you're talking Smile Munden, it's a combination of Quay Walker and Channing Tindall. I mean, you've got that athleticism and that tackling ability and size and strength and on down the line. I think he's going to be a first-round pick next year. Obviously, like you said, Roos, the health is a little bit of a concern and a question going into the season. How available is he going to be?
Here's the deal. Even if he is healthy enough to go, or maybe he's healthy enough to play, but they sit him out. You're talking about a lot of games there at the front end of the schedule, 2 or 3 at least, where you're, missing out on the chance to rack up some stats if you're going to really be too critical about that. So maybe that holds him back. But that's where the health could potentially be a setback for me.
Yeah. I mean, but, and you look at, the health was a setback for him last year. And, obviously he played in, I think it was 3 less games than Jamon did. And still finished with more tackles. We'll see if it's 3 games or 2 games or 1 or more than 3. But I think he's got a chance to. That's kind of how it played out last year. Jamon Dumas-Johnson was Georgia's leading tackler until Smile Munden got fully healthy, and game in and game out, Smile Munden was the team's leading tackler. You just looked at the stat sheet, and he was right there on top every game. Like the last 7, I want to say he was the leading tackler for like 5 of them. I'm just going off the top of my head, but it was regular to see Smile Munden atop that tackle list, and slowly but surely he made up for that missed time.
Those DL guys are pretty interesting to me too. I think that you could see them kind of rise to this occasion as well. I know we're like you said, we're preseason, but Nazir Stackhouse, Zion Logue, Warren Brinson, those guys got a lot of reps under their belts, and they're going to have reps available this year as well. So how does that end up factoring in? I think that any of those guys could probably find themselves in a good position there.
I see what Tampa Dog says up here with Kamari Lassiter, and that's the other one. Would I have him as an All-American, going into the year? Probably not. But certainly an All-SEC type player, and he was left off of that list for Phil Steele, and that felt like maybe messed it up a little bit. He had Dalen Everett on the 3rd team and not Kamari Lassiter. Those two probably should have been switched and could have been a mix-up or whatever. But and I'm just as high on Dalen Everett as I am Kamari, but I think Kamari has a chance to be. Obviously Dalen's younger. I think Kamari has a chance to go early in the NFL draft next year with a strong season this year.
Credit to Brandon Lawless for working a hill of beans into the comment section. Preseason, don't make a hill of beans. You're not wrong about that. Back to Brock Bowers. Do y'all know the last time a tight end was a Heisman finalist? I looked it up. I had no idea, but does anyone have a ballpark guess?
Kellen Winslow?
Nope.
I'm gonna guess like in the 40s.
So that was the only time a Heisman went to a tight end, Leon Hart from Notre Dame. The last finalist was Ken McAfee, also from Notre Dame in 1977. So Bowers is getting a lot of hype already right now on some of these preseason Heisman lists. Won't surprise me at all if he finds a way to get there, because we know that Heisman voters love storylines. He probably could have been there last year, if we're being honest, based on the way he played ball and the way he put up numbers. But it won't surprise me if he's there this year. So that's some history to watch out for if you're a Georgia fan, if Brock Bowers makes it. I want to see some of these preseason guys go out on some limbs with like the transfer portal guys, like Dominic Lovett. If you're really paying attention to ball, you could have Dominic Lovett on a second team All SEC or anything like that. And I don't think anybody would bat an eye, because if you know what Georgia's looking for in their offense, he could really get a lot of touches. And we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show.
I'm with you completely. Yeah. How does it get? You're talking about 2 guys who came into what was a sneakily prolific passing attack to some degree last year, especially in terms of Georgia's standards, in Ra Thomas and Lovett, who were leading receivers for their respective teams. And, how does that change the face of it? Yeah, I'm with you completely on that. And, now I didn't read Steele's list, so surely to God, Lad McConkey was somewhere on All SEC, right?
Second team. The All SEC. It was those All Americans were all on the first team. McConkey and Munden were on the second team. Tyke Smith, second team. Third team, Kendall Milton, Xavier Truss, third team. Amarius Mims, third team. Dalen Everett, third team, and Nazir Stackhouse, fourth team.
Yeah, I can get done with that.
Another preseason topic that everyone wants to talk about is Georgia's ability to three-peat. We've mentioned Kirk Herbstreit's predictions about LSU and Bama to On3's J.D. Piquel earlier in Nashville, the On3 Elite Series event. And I just wondered out loud, is it because Kirk Herbstreit doesn't want to be the guy that is just saying the same old thing that Georgia will three-peat? Because I think most of us on the show here are going to predict the same thing. Rusty, I know you've been on the record to do it, but Bruce Feldman now has said that he also expects that Georgia should be the favorite to three-peat, and it's not as much about the Dogs as it is about the rest of college football not necessarily having an answer for Georgia. That's the part of the argument that I don't necessarily agree with. I think with the portal right now, with the way that these elite teams do recruit and get talent on the field, I do think that if Georgia met up with an Ohio State or an LSU or Alabama, people are looking down on Bama. I still think that these programs, these blue bloods, are going to give Georgia everything that the Dogs want to handle next season.
You think about it, what's beat Georgia lately? And it's been an elite quarterback and an elite wide receiver. So you break down Ohio State, and they do have at least a pair of elite receivers. But the question mark is quarterback. Do they have a guy on that field that you feel like this is the guy that can, quote unquote, slay the dragon? Alabama, Bryce Young absolutely gave Georgia fits in every opportunity he could. Even in a loss, he was hell. You had to hold your breath until that last throw. So you look at him and you look at Alabama. Now, does Alabama have 4 NFL first-round wide receivers like they had Georgia faced? They don't right now, in my opinion. They got questions at quarterback. Now, I think Alabama is absolutely a lot better than people kind of sleeping a little bit, if you can say that on Alabama, because everybody says Georgia, Ohio State. You know, Alabama's going to be pissed off.
Just stop doing it, man. I mean, how many times are you going to do this? And they're dudes, man. I mean, they are. Alabama is year in and year out, and you can take it to the bank. It's Nick Saban. It's a top 5 team, regardless.
Every year. And they look like, when I say they look like Georgia, Georgia looks like Alabama, and Alabama looks like Georgia. Ohio State looks like Georgia. Ohio State looks like Alabama. I've said it a million times. When TCU walked in that room, they didn't look like Georgia.
No.
To be honest with you, it wasn't really close.
It looked like when Alabama showed up to Georgia in 15.
Yeah, it did. Like, it just didn't look the same. So to me, to knock for someone to knock the champ out, Georgia's going to have to give somebody some breaks, or they're going to have elite quarterback play. Now, that doesn't mean I'm sitting here saying Georgia's going to steamroll everybody, because we can sit here and talk about that Kent State first half last year. We can talk about Missouri, especially if Dominic Lovett doesn't get hurt, because they didn't have an answer. Nope. Mississippi State, Georgia couldn't run the ball for a damn yard against Mississippi State. So let's not just sit here and say they ran through that schedule. There's a lot of questions still, and the odds of three-peating are ridiculous, insane. But I'm with a few of those guys in saying that Georgia is going to take a damn performance to knock them out of the whole thing. I mean, it's going to take, for me, a game from turnovers, and it's going to take an elite wide receiver and elite quarterback play to beat them.
Unquestionable.
Yep. I mean, I completely agree there. And I don't, you're right there, Rusty, that there's teams on this that if you overlook them, they can give you trouble. There's a couple that I think as I did my, look through the schedule and ranked the games and did the offseason overviews of those teams, there's a couple of intriguing ones. Do I think that Georgia is a touchdown plus favorite in every one of those games? Absolutely. But the game's not played on paper. And,
touchdown favorite at Tennessee right now.
Yep. I mean, that's kind of the one that's going to be the closest. That Ole Miss, I think Kentucky is a team that could give them some trouble. South Carolina, depends kind of what kind of momentum they come into that game with. Did they beat North Carolina in the season opener? Are they still riding high off of what they did to end 2022? How does Auburn take on the season early? You know, or do they have that home crowd behind them week 5?
Yeah, that's the one, Palmer, that I'm looking at and saying people are assuming because it's Freeze's first year. I don't know. Going to Auburn never feels good to me. Tomahawk Dog wants to know how Michigan stacks up physically on the hoof. They probably should have beaten TCU, but they overlooked them.
I mean, they'll be physical. You know, that's the brand of football that they play. And you know, I think that as we're having this conversation here on June 19th, Georgia is not scheduled to play Michigan. They're not scheduled to play Alabama or LSU or whatever. There's a lot of things that have to happen in order for those games to happen, not just for Georgia, not just for those other teams, for everyone across the country. And so, you know, as you look at the 12 teams that you know Georgia's going to face, like I said, they're a touchdown plus favorite in every one of those games. You can't overlook any of them. Because if you do, you may not be getting one of those matchups with a team that should and probably will compete with Georgia better than anybody else. In Alabama, and LSU, Michigan, and Ohio State, you know, anybody else, USC, Texas, those types of teams that could give Georgia more trouble than anybody that's on their regular season schedule. Those games are earned, not given.
Yeah, just look at Ohio State, and then. Here's something from Rhett Womack. I don't know if there's necessarily a comment here, but would we have said, what if someone said this 3 or 4 years ago? A 90% blue chip ratio should never be taken lightly, but I'd take Kirby's preparation over Saban. I'm not sure I necessarily disagree with that today, but it's just crazy how the tables have turned.